Appreciate your expertise. I just kind of want to follow up on the last couple of questions on the issue of taking your expertise and being able to look at this kind of from all the expertise you have and looking at it from the outside and say, you know, here's what really needs to be happening. But in real time, in this culture, in this country, and what is happening, and what's happening right here today in other committees that are meeting, talking about what do we do with refugees, talking about the difference between what we're all saying and what we should be saying, and some of the benefits about what you're talking about with refugees and how we look then at all these things being projected back. What is the role of the President? Because he's saying things too. So he's saying, you know, earlier on, these are JV folks, he's saying we've contained these people as early as the morning of the attack on Paris. What kind of role does that play? How does that play back to ISIL when there is a disconnect to the American people? They're watching it every night. We're watching it with them. That the President's here. We're here. Governors are saying no. Federal law, the President says, overrides anything, and you have Americans all over the place, and they're hearing a mixed message from all of us. What does that say? What kind of signal does that send?
Okay, that's a great point, and it weaves in some of the other questions and things we've been talking about. We are, of course, a presidential system.
Correct.
Policies are set at one end of Pennsylvania Avenue, and they're resourced at this end. Mm-hmm. Our post-9/11 moment, if you will, that you described, is actually this time around maybe a pre-9/11 mm-hmm. moment, where we now have the opportunity, as we look at what happened in Paris, mm-hmm. And look at what could happen here, to say it's a new day, we are going to move together in developing and implementing a coordinated policy that is truly whole of government and that involves consultations, meaningful consultations with Congress. And we're going to do it quickly. Now, that has to be a presidential initiative.
Correct. And let me just throw one wrinkle on this, because when we're talking about real-time, real issues, real problems that we deal with right now, I just talked to some of my folks that just deployed. They were there for 6 months in Iraq, came back, and I was just with them last week. And after the doors were shut, and I said, what's really going on? Because we're hearing horror stories sitting on HASC. And the rules of engagement keeps coming up. So I talked to flyers that when it came to trying to engage on a convoy of American trucks that were left behind when the Iraqis fled their positions, heavy artillery, convoy of ISIL soldiers with artillery in the back, the beat's on, they ask if they can engage, and the decision came back no, and it does not seem to be just the folks I've talked to. We've had hearings here on the issue of rules of engagement. If the rules of engagement aren't lined up with what you're talking about in potentially a pre-9/11 event, how in the where else do you start, and what else can you do if, you know, we're hearing one thing from people on the ground and the message from the White House seems to be something entirely different, or the message even from Secretary Kerry? What do you do with the great divide in between?
I think that we realize that Friday the 13th changed the world, mm-hmm. and it needs to change how we think, organize, and act. Let's look at all of it. What are we doing? What are the ROE? Do they make sense anymore? Are they going to allow us to degrade Islamic State to the point where, like Al-Qaeda in the Afghanistan-Pakistan border area, they really don't have the bandwidth right. to plan complex organizations? How do we get there? This needs to happen. It needs to happen on a whole of government basis, and it needs to happen now.
I appreciate it. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Rourke.